All right. I'd like to
Do it again.
call this. I'd like to call this meeting order, please. At 4:31. Dorothy, will you call roll, please?
Yes, sir. Bob Waller,
Here.
Garrett Harmon,
Here.
Trisha Byram, David Jones,
Here.
Rustin Zuber, Bill Morgan.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a quorum. First agenda item, approve the minutes from the August 1 meeting. They start on page 2.
I move to approve the
Have-
minutes.
I have a motion to have a second.
I'll second.
Motion is second. All in favor, raise your right hand. Passes 4-0. Item number 2, consideration and action. Item 2A, Drew.
Thank you, Chairman. Commission. Says consideration and action to approve an ordinance amending the City of Kerrville, Texas sign code known as Chapter 6 Advertising of the city's Code of Ordinances. With the adoption of the Kerrville 2050 plan, there were several action items that came out of that to look at the update of our codes and ordinances. One of the big ones we started with was the zoning code, and the sign code was another big item. With the rewrite being recommended, this went to the Code Review Committee. Code Review Committee looked at it and said an overhaul of the sign code was not appropriate. And they did look at least an update to bring in several changes as needed. Some of the guiding principles and action items that this update to the sign code does address under economic development to ensure that development services, processes, and existing codes and ordinance are not impediments to development or redevelopment of the community. Community and neighborhood character placemaking to engage third-party services to assist in the review and rewrite of city codes, including the sign code. Downtown revitalization to maintain and support small businesses with local identity. Economic development to promote new retail development while considering its impact on existing developments. Public facilities and the built and natural environment to focus a close attention on building architecture and scale to preserve Kerrville's small town charm. So far for the sign code, the Code Review Committee has had 3 meetings regarding the sign code on May 9th, June 6th, and July 30th. There's a brief update as far as part of the public open house on May 16th to the sign code. Amendments following the Code Review Committee, some of the things that we did look at based on the Code Review Committee's discussion was to remove the ambient light survey requirement as it relates to electronic displays, lowered the awning and canopy height clearance to 7 feet, which matches our current code, to allow a 1-second fade transition for electronic displays. It still does not permit any animation or traveling messages, but from page to page, that 1-second transition may fade in and out to soften the flicker effect. And then, of course, clarify the electronic display requirements that I'll cover in a later slide. Some of the other impacts that directed the update to the sign code, some legislative findings, interpretations, and general matters updating to modern standards. Increased focus on content neutrality based on the Reed Supreme Court decision. That non-commercial messages may be substituted for commercial messages if the sign is legally conforming. Exempts governmental signs and flags. Traffic control devices. Requires a clear display of address numerals on all properties. And requires compliance with any law that regulates the posting of danger and prohibited access signs. And of course, if the sign code conflicts with any other ordinance, the more restrictive applies. Through the definitions, we clarified the definition between awning and canopy sign. Before, those two had quite a bit of overlap, the way they were previously defined. So they've now been separated to awning being a pedestrian-oriented structure, whereas a canopy is more of a vehicle-oriented structure. Awnings covering sidewalks, entries and windows, canopies, porte-cochees, gasoline canopies, and so on. Updated the definitions for damaged and dilapidated condition of signs and requiring the removal within 30 days following any notice from the city. And it added to the definition for electronic display as a part of another type of sign rather than a standalone sign itself. Added several graphics to the sign code as it relates to the measurement of signs for the different categories. Different photographs showing examples of the different types of signs to help with interpretation as to what type of sign requirements should apply to each of those. Consolidated several of the smaller sign types into incidental signs. So these are your address, auxiliary, event signs, integral signs to the building, or nameplate signs on the entryways of buildings. Clarified beacon to include laser light displays, which are both prohibited. Directional signs, such as your entrance, exit, drive-through, and those type are required to be on premise, not in the public right-of-way. Clarified that a freestanding sign may be on a single pole or twin masonry supports. Added a new definition for handbills and placards, which were prohibited, and added a new definition for your mural being an original art display. Consolidated the neon signs into the definition for lighted sign to broaden that category. Pole banners being on private property, either single or dual pane mounted on decorative poles. The roof sign may be painted directly on the roof. Snipe signs, which are now renamed to placard signs, which are typically off-premise. Small signs that you see posted up along the sidewalk are not the same as incidental signs, and the placard signs are not allowed, as with the previous code. Clarified the difference between window signs and window murals, and then any signage within the building visible from outside within 3 feet of the windows. Again, here's some additional graphics for those types of signs for their interpretation. Added for incidental sign, which is that consolidated definition with a total of 4 square feet per property. Removed those types of signs that were consolidated into incidental. Clarified the definition of flags, which are exempt as governmental flags. Window signs have a maximum of 25% window coverage so that you don't block out the entire interior of the business. It includes window murals, different gaseous tubing, LEDs, strip lighting, etc. Added to the pole banners a clearance height for pedestrian areas versus vehicular areas, and then added to the general maintenance for repair of existing signs. Extended the regulations for the Downtown Arts and Culture District and replacement for the Central Business District in the new zoning code. Added to the sidewalk signs, which were previously allowed, but clarified they must be within 5 feet of the building, located with close proximity to the establishment's entrance, and maintain a clear pedestrian path of 4 feet. Awning sides, we did revert back to the 7-foot clearance as consistent with the current code. The draft that was posted online with the packet and that came out of the code review committee did have an 8-foot clearance, just moving up to modern standards. But with our existing sign ordinance and so many existing signs meeting that 7-foot clearance, we brought that back down to 7 foot. Balloons are prohibited. Other signs are allowed with a minimum of a 5-foot setback to keep those signs from intruding into the public right-of-way, particularly into the sidewalk for pedestrians. Directional signs, again, must be on premise, set back 5 feet from the property line. Awning sign cannot be internally illuminated. We did clarify that definition that these are pedestrian-oriented, compatible with the building design. 7-foot clearance on pedestrian areas, 14-foot clearance for any vehicular areas. To contain business name and logo only, so it's not to advertise products, but to advertise the name and identity of the building. Canopy signs similarly have a 7-foot clearance for any pedestrian areas, 14 for vehicular areas, business name or logo only, with the exception that fuel pricing for gas stations is allowed. Canopy roof signs, similar requirements there. The freestanding sign, again on a single pole or twin masonry supports, are excluded from the downtown core. They may be shared if they have a shared easement or mutual use agreement. For the minimal small lots, they're allowed a maximum height of 20 feet, may be internally or externally illuminated, and amended to the amount of maximum electronic display based on the various frontage requirements for those lots. And lots with over 400 feet of dual frontage may have signs on each frontage. Added to the monument sign, again, internally or externally illuminated, electronic display based on the size of the property, and sharing is allowed with appropriate easements or mutual agreements. Off-premise sign, similar requirements to internally or externally illuminated, and may have electronic displays, not allowed on unplatted or vacant undeveloped property. Added to the model home sign section, clarify that they may be required to be 5 feet from the property line, not allowed within any easement, and externally illuminated with shielded lighting only. Added projecting signs, so these are perpendicular and attached to the building, may not be internally illuminated, and required a 7-foot clearance on pedestrian walkways, 14 for vehicular areas. Business name and logo only, similar to the awnings. Residential development signs, these are to advertise a subdivision that's in progress and under development. May not be electronic. It must be owned and maintained on common property through the HOA and along with any associated landscaping. Added to the wall signs that they may be internally illuminated with individual cutouts and words. There may not be electronic displays on the walls, and they may be painted on the wall. That is a change from the previous code where signs were not allowed to be painted on the building. The code review committee did want to include that, and that is different than a mural. A mural being original art piece, a wall sign related to the business on the property. And for electronic displays, the only allowed within 100 feet and visible from the right-of-way, can be on or off premise, must be framed or bordered by at least 6 inches of masonry, sign, or frame material, required underground electric service, required an automatic dimmer or photocell for reduced nighttime luminance or cloudy days, keep them from being overly bright during those time periods. Not allowed sequential displays so that each message leads to the next message. Clarified the brightness, that it has a brightness level of 0.3 foot candles above natural ambient light. Again, the ambient light survey is not required prior to installation. Added a coordination with local authorities for any emergency messaging, such as Amber Alerts or natural disasters. Then we maintained the 4-second message display that is in the current code. It does allow for a 1-second fade or transition between messages, and added the size limitations for both freestanding and monument slides, or monument signs, based on those lot sizes. For the freestanding sign, I have 3 different lot size categories from 50 feet to 199 feet, 200 feet to 399 feet, and over 400 feet of frontage. For the smaller lot, 50 to 199 feet, they're allowed a maximum square footage of 100 square feet, of which 32 square feet may be electronic display. For 200 feet to 399 feet, maximum size of 150 square feet, whereas 50 of that may be allowed digital display or electronic display. over 400 feet, these properties, being a larger property, are allowed 2 signs. The first sign up to 200 square feet with a maximum of 64 square feet of digital display. The secondary sign is allowed 100 square feet with 32 square feet digital display. The total maximum signage has not changed from the current code. We just updated the digital display that's allowed for each of those signs. The digital display is not required to be any percentage of the total signage that is placed on the property, but at each a separate maximum. The monument signs for electronic display, we have 2 different size properties, less than 50 feet of frontage and over 50 feet of frontage. Less than 50 square feet, current maximum for the sign is 32 square feet, and they are allowed up to 30 square feet of that to be digital. So that sign could be 100% digital display. Over 50 square feet, current code allows 64 square feet of area, and the new recommendation is up to 64 square feet of electronic display. A shared monument sign, which is commercial complex or multiple properties sharing one monument sign, is allowed up to 100 square feet with 64 square feet of electronic display. Off-premise signs are allowed electronic display with a maximum of 100 square feet total, of 64 of which may be electronic display. This is the code comparison that the Planning and Zoning Commission has seen previously based on some other cities. And with that, I'll open it up for discussion with the commission or public hearing.
Okay, we do not have a public hearing today. If you're a late arrival to speak before this forum today, you need to fill out a speaker request form. If they're up here, if you need to pick one up. If not, we're going to try to stick to 3 minutes. We won't cut you off, but we need to, we've got a lot of people want to speak, and we're going to try to keep it consistent. I'll call the name. When you approach the podium, please give us your name and address, please. And I'll put these, I think the order I received them. David Wampler.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. David Wampler, 411 Bob White Drive. How are y'all? I appreciate the opportunity. I guess my first question would be why we're even considering this as a community, expanding the size of electronic billboard signs at all. I understand the total size of the signs themselves are not being considered for expansion, but the signs, the electronic signs, this has been going on now for the last 20 years that I know of. With every iteration of new sign technology, everybody wants a bigger sign. And the question is, given the 2050 process that we just went through, our community just went through with regard to preserving natural beauty and the hill country type ambiance that we have here, I don't think the electronic signs really at all are congruent with that philosophy. I know that we already have them, but I would really ask you to consider whether or not it's in the best interest of our community to expand that use. One of the arguments that I've heard in the past is that business owners want ever larger signs or competing signs so that their businesses can be easily found. And I think, again, 20 years ago, that might have had some merit, but in today's time when we have Google Maps and other electronic means of both advertising, identifying our businesses, and driving right to a specific door anymore, there's really less merit to the argument that I need a huge electronic sign for people to find my business. So I would really just encourage you guys to consider that and to not make, kind of a bad situation even worse in our community with these kinds of signs.
Thanks, David. Kathleen Brinkman.
Kathleen Brinkman, 444 Sydney Baker Street South. First, I want to thank you. You guys have for your time and dedication and undertaking these amazing projects. You guys have done yeoman's work with the code, and looking at these sign revisions are also really important. Of all the work you've done, though, I think the signage may be the most important thing you're addressing, because the signs will really set the theme and the ambiance of our city. And I think that's why people are so interested in this portion of it. I myself haven't studied the code, I'll admit that, but some people that I do highly respect have expressed concern about what's possible in the sign changes and what that means for our community. There's a balance that has to be struck between allowing businesses to advertise themselves and make themselves known, and the ambiance that we want to create here in terms of the atmosphere. We don't want Las Vegas and Kerrville. If anything, we want more like Fredericksburg than Austin, I'd say. I've looked a little bit on the internet about things, especially on the digital sign issues, and there's quite a bit of information out there and quite a bit of concerns. Things like driver distraction, the eyes being able to adjust from lighted signs that are digital in nature back to the roadway in the dark, light pollution, which is becoming an even greater concern with that throughout communities. Also energy use, because electronic signs have a much bigger draw. Even when they're LED and other kinds of efficient technologies, they still draw more electricity than regular signs. What I would like to ask is for the commission to proceed cautiously with this rather than doing a sweeping change, which it sounds like is the focus you're not going, that you are going to proceed cautiously, but especially on electronic signs. Quite a few cities have banned electronic signs for aesthetic reasons. And while I'm not advocating right now an absolute ban, I think we want to really consider what it brings to our community and also what it takes away. That being said, again, I'll just close with saying, again, I think Kerrville would do better to emulate Fredericksburg and to not look so much to Austin for possibilities. But again, thank you.
Thank you. Stacy Page.
Good evening. Pleasure to be with you. I'm Stacy Page. My address is 2233 Rock Creek. Many of you I know in this room, and I wanted to share with you that I currently serve as the Director of Community Relations for the Callow Foundation. And it is my pleasure to speak on behalf of the Callow Foundation and the staff to implore you to really cautiously consider what we're going through right now in this process of signage. Many of you know my background is hospital marketing and fundraising. There is no more important particular attribute to hospitals than wayfinding and signage. Many times when we go into a hospital, we have no idea where we're going, where the ICU is, where the telemetry unit is, where the nursery is going to be. And so we certainly recognize the importance of wayfinding and signage, but we also recognize the importance of creating a community that reflects the Texas Hill Country, that reflects the charm and the small town atmosphere that I think many folks in the city come to seek in this area. I have been a resident of Fredericksburg for 3.5 years, and I will say that they have done an incredible job, and they are to be looked to as an example of minimizing electronic signage, of minimizing signage. We have many, many outlets in Kerrville that can distribute information on top of Google Maps, etc. We've got airports, we've got hotels, we've got restaurants that are able to direct folks to where they need to be. So really, I also will ask you to cautiously consider any amendments or changes to the current situation and regulations that you have. We just don't want anything obtrusive or obnoxious to interfere with the city night sky that we get to look at, because we do get to see the stars here. There are no skyscrapers here, fortunately. The beauty of the Hill Country is what draws folks here. I'm originally from Dallas, Texas. There's a reason why I'm retiring and I'm working in Kerrville, Texas, and it doesn't have anything to do with the electronic signage or billboards or those type of things that the big city offers. I chose to be here for the small town charm and for the aesthetics that Kerrville, Texas offers. Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce Strachey.
Bruce Strachey, 615 Earl Garrett Street. I brought a couple of different comments going through the language on the sign. There was some confusion in the city on the draft ordinance about lighting using unshielded bulbs, light buildings and whether that was allowed to outline buildings in the downtown area. And so I had a suggestion on the language. Currently, it's kind of confusing because it just says basically the downtown arts and cultural district, and then it goes on to say or for holiday lighting. And instead, if we were to break that into bullet points, because it's really two bullet points, there is outlined building outlining that we can do with unshielded bulbs of less than 40 watts that is allowed 24/7, 365 days a week, a year, like we see at Paco's at Francisco's. And there also is holiday lighting that must be taken down within 14 days after the holiday. And it needs to be clear that those two things are two separate things, because in the downtown arts and cultural district, we want to encourage that building outlining. And so I've got some language, I'll share it with Drew and Dorothy. Also, there's a lot of confusion about awning signs and canopy signs, and I really admire that they tried to do it. Then there's still confusion, because I think most of what people are calling awning signs in the downtown core right now are actually probably better described as projecting signs, because they're not on the outside of the awning, they're not on the side of the awning. There's something that's hanging from the awning, something that projects from the building and hangs down. And we have cleaned that up to make that a little clearer with the height and all, but there's a lot of confusion about that, and that's always really tough. I'm concerned about the sidewalk signs, because if we think about, and I'll use an example in front of Jeff's building, we have a very wide sidewalk there. But if we place the sidewalk sign that's in front of 4 Premier Properties right now in the 5-foot spot, we're actually in the main pedestrian traffic zone. That sign is better, more than 5 feet away from the building, and does not obstruct traffic and is not in the way for pedestrians. And so that 5-foot limit is concerning to me. And so I've got some language on that I'll send over to Drew and Dorothy as well, since I only have 3 minutes. Otherwise, I'll share it with you. Then lastly, I want to talk about respect. This is a wonderful hill country community, and I know that many people here in this room that hear me talk about what a wonderful place Kerrville is to live and I've been doing that for years. And I'm going to continue to do it. And part of what is so fantastic about this community is the fact that in general, we truly respect ourselves. And if we're going to continue that as sign technology continues on, we need to take a serious look at the International Dark Sky Association and their recommendations. We should be downlighting all signs if their illumination is from the exterior. Anytime that we're doing illumination from inside, whether it's an electronic display or a neon sign or a sign that's lit from inside, instead of looking at foot candles that are cumulative on the surface, we should be looking back at the nits. And if we look at the original ordinance that we're trying to adopt right now, currently the daytime luminance allowed is 10 times the IDA's recommendation for internally lit signs. And the nighttime illumination is twice the recommendation. The IDA is the International Dark Sky Association. It's not some little thing somewhere. This is a well-documented, well-thought-out process of how to light signs that do provide wayfinding, that do provide the identification of a building in the evening so I can find the restaurant or the bookstore or the library that I'm trying to go to. And it's very effective at maintaining our dark sky. And I can tell you that I have been one to take a chair from Paco's or from Pa's and pull it out into the street after 7 o'clock at night and enjoy perhaps a meal or an adult beverage, and we can still see our stars from downtown Kerrville. And we want to preserve that. We need to respect ourselves.
Thanks, Bruce. Walt Koenig.
Yeah, good afternoon. The Kerrville Area Chamber of Commerce really appreciates the opportunity to talk to y'all today. We want to thank the Code Review Committee, who worked very hard to come up with the recommendations we're considering today, and I want to thank you all also for your service. As a former chair of the 2050 Economic Development Subcommittee and Steering Committee, I know how difficult and challenging your job is, given the diversity of opinion within our community. There has been a lot of discussion of late regarding our sign ordinances. Our membership is likewise very concerned about this issue. I've heard many arguments in favor of and against modification of the digital sign codes in particular. The consistently strong feedback we're getting from our over 900 members has been supportive of the recommendations and that have been put forth by the committee. Not unanimous, but certainly strong and supportive. As an example, in the last month alone, we have 4 new chamber members who are owners of downtown businesses that will be promoting their businesses on the chamber sign. We've heard a number of arguments against permissive sign codes. One is that of safety. Extensive research from our consultants and ourselves on this issue have revealed really no positive correlation between traffic safety and digital signage. We've also heard that a change of the sign codes would be unfair to those who invested in digital sign technology in the past and under the current regulations. I've personally talked to most of our members who have this technology deployed within their businesses, and I've found no single incident where someone's upset about this change. In fact, some have found it rather amusing that this is being offered as an argument. The reality is we have a different opinion on that is really a matter of personal taste and aesthetic sensibilities. The opposition to the revision of the ordinance is largely individual, and where support is really more institutional. The chamber support's clear, and I want to make that very clear today. The ISD already hosts a sign that's larger than the modified regulations would allow, and Peterson Health, Shrine University, Alamo College, as well as HCTC and a lot of our other larger businesses and small, are taking advantage of this technology to promote their businesses. The chamber fully supports the defined and endorsed changes by the Code Review Committee. They worked hard on this. They were very considered in this and very measured in this. We believe that these very reasonable revisions will allow our businesses to be advantaged. We also believe that these relatively minor revisions will not in any way detract from the aesthetics of our community. We really appreciate that the business community can talk to you all today and have a voice in this process. And we really thank you all again for your service. I know it's difficult, and we really, really appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mark Stone.
Mark Stone, 840 Earl Garrett, Kerrville. Thank you guys for lending an ear to what some of are trying to say. I'm going to loan part of my time to Bruce Strachey since he went over so long, but I just want to speak really in support of, I am not for the electronic signs, and I really can't state the reasons any better than has already been presented this evening. But I too am here. I like Kerrville for the small town feel. I am not for a lit up, some people have compared it to Las Vegas. That's probably not fair. However, I stand opposed to it and just wanted to make that known. I would maybe direct a question to Drew because I really wasn't able to find it. In the RT zone, Earl Garrett, north of North Street or Shriner, how will the electronic signs be allowed to move up north?
So the RT zone has specific requirements for non-residential uses. They would not be allowed electronic signs in the RT zone.
Thank you. Makes me happy. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Mike Seegerman.
I'm Mike Seegerman. I live at 4000 Comanche Trace Drive, and a couple of notes. I served on the Planning and Zoning Commission for 2 years, and in the 2 years I served on that commission, there were 2 requests that I remember for sign variances, and none of them involved size. Both of them involved location. I also served on the 2050 Steering Committee, and all through the process of the 2050 Steering Committee, there was nothing in the discussions that I heard or all the conclusions that came up that talked about expanding electronic signs. It talked about reasonable, sustainable, controlled growth. It talked about keeping the small town charm of the city of Kerrville for the residents of Kerrville, which I believe that increasing the size of these electronic signs is diametrically opposite of what we were trying to do. I don't understand why the city of Kerrville is moving in a direction that most other small communities are moving away from. Electronic signs are being prohibited in quite a few communities today, as are billboards. They're considered to be eye pollution. I understand businesses wanting to, promote their businesses. We have quite a few businesses in town that have put electronic signs up that have been within what the code requires, and I think they seem to be working fine. I take a little bit of exception with what Walt said about most of the opposition to these increase in electronic signs is personal. Every opinion we have here about these signs is personal. The business community has a personal opinion about whether they want to promote their businesses, but I think the big picture is the residents of Kerrville are the strength of this community, and I think their personal opinion about whether we should increase the size, go from a maximum 32 square foot size of an electronic sign to 64 square feet, that's not a small adjustment. That's not a minor adjustment. That's a major adjustment. Sure, maybe there's some instances where someone has 400 feet of frontage where they can have a sign that's larger, but we're protecting the downtown core from the electronic signs. Why are we not protecting the city? That's my question. I think you guys should think long and hard before you start passing a new ordinance that allows anywhere from 50 to 64 square foot electronic signs. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Rector.
Gentlemen, I've had the honor of working in Kerrville for the past 40 years. I've never seen prosperity in this community what I have seen the last 3 years. Sales taxes are increasing. Hotel motel occupancy is increasing. Property values are up. We have seen new residents moving to Kerrville, creating steady but manageable growth in Kerrville. Consequently, we have too many buyers chasing too few homes, and so our taxes are up. That formula that we've got seems to be working. So I'm here today to ask you, why are we considering changing a formula that is working so well? What is the crisis to be able to change when we seem to be doing and experiencing all the right things? Our businesses downtown, as well as your businesses outside, depend on tourism, depend on new residents coming to town. We've got a formula that works to continue that. I think we need to look very, very cautiously about changing it. I think we want to be more like Fredericksburg than Bernie. We don't want to be like Fredericksburg. We've got a unique community, and the 2050 plan points that out. And we need to continue to look at that 2050 plan because it describes our uniqueness. Just like each of you, I have a business interest in this community, and I want this community, Kerrville, to be business friendly. But what does that mean, being business friendly? It means one thing, that we have clear and easy to understand rules, and that we apply those rules equally to everybody. A new business person should be able to know that they can invest in a business in Kerrville and be assured that their competitor will not have a larger electronic sign just because they have a bigger lot for their business. We need to assure each business in town that they have a level playing field to compete. They should compete on the basis of customer service, price, and also quality of the product that they sell. We are a small town, and our citizen can make the decision of who wins that contest. Very simply, how do we continue this formula? Very simply, you have a document in front of you that you're looking at that begins to increase the size significantly of electronic signs. We can correct that very easily. If we just put 32 square foot in each size sign and each category of sign, we are continuing the formula that works. And I encourage you to look very cautiously at moving giant steps when we've got something that is doing the job that we have asked it to do in Kerrville. I want to thank each of you for serving on the 2050 plan. It is a great document. I just ask that we consider it strongly in every decision that we make. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. Richard Musty.
I'm Richard Mosty, and I grew up in this community, and it's coming on 70 years. And as I look around the room, I see some faces that have a little more history than me. But I consider today is a day of a crossroads. And it's not about personal taste. It's not about the business community. It's about vision. This community has a vision, and it is the 2050 plan. And it says, I think very well, it sets out all the parameters of the study, and many people in this room were part of that, including this commission. And it says that whatever we do, we're going to do so while preserving the small town charm, heritage, arts, and culture of this community. And I ask first, does doubling the size of the electronic sign further that vision? Whenever we start making individual decisions and we make a little pinprick in a vision, then that blurs the vision. And eventually, if you do it enough, then that vision goes away. And that's why I say I think we're at a crossroads. This is a time when the vision is set forth. And as some have said, we're talking about a dark sky presentation. And why are we considering today doubling electronic signage when we're still waiting to hear the dark sky presentation? I don't think this electronic part of this ordinance is ready for that. This vision is something from the community as a whole. The business community is a part of that. They are not the community. As we sit here today, I think that that is the most important thing that any city commission might do, is say, begin with a focus on the vision. And whenever you make a decision or whenever you make a vote, does this vote further the vision of this community as a small town charm, heritage, arts, and culture? Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Mike Walker.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm going to try not to be repetitive of the things that I've already said. I rise to speak for this to be tabled or referred back, and I'll tell you why. I think you've done a great job CRC has done a good job in bringing this forth. Excuse me. But there's some things lacking in here. And I think they need to be thoroughly reviewed. And the case that Richard just brought up, I will reiterate, and that is that as an architect, I can see you combining, I can see you taking landscaping out and considering it separately. I cannot see you taking dark skies and considering it separately from signing. It just doesn't make any sense because the two are interrelated. And if I've sent some of you a little dark skies survey of the state of Texas, and it will show you, you know, the condition that we're in. We're growing brighter every day. Just drive into Kerrville any night and look at that glow in the sky, and you'll know what I'm talking about. The many communities, I hate to use Fredericksburg because everybody said, oh, that's Fredericksburg. Well, okay, but there's some things to be learned over there. There are no internally lit signs over there. If they are, they're turned off at night. There are no electronic signs. There are 3 reader boards in the whole city, and none of them are electronic. It's a much more distracting atmosphere. By definition, people could say all they want to about this distraction business and safety, but if you attract attention to something, I don't know if it's Newton's law or whatever it is, but you've got to distract from something else. You can't just say, oh, we can just look at all this stuff at once. And it is a distraction for people, particularly as this community ages. The more trouble we have. I got a friend that's 105 years old, rides around town on a scooter. You've probably seen it. Please don't run over Floyd. He's 105. Okay? So those are the kind of people we have to look out for, the people, you know, driving down the left turn lane and so forth. So, but we don't need any more distractions. All we need is information about this store or that store or this church or this nonprofit and where we go, how do we get there? And we do not need all their advertising strewn out before us, and we're driving down the road trying to say, what did that say? That is not where we're going. So I'd ask you to carefully consider that. And then also would dispute one issue, and that was the issue about these people who have invested in signs. And they followed the rules. And now suddenly we're going to, oh, well, we don't need those rules anymore. If we're going to follow a 2050 plan or anything else, we need to stick to it or have a really good reason why we're not going to do it. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mike. Ed Wallace.
Ed Wallace, 131 Royal Oaks. I should have worn my long pants. I didn't know. I came down here just because I saw Rector's letter to the editor, I think. And basically, I'm against, for all the reasons that have been said, any expansion of digital or electronic signs in the city of Kerrville. I think we can find our way fine with what we've got, and we don't need to expand that, period. Thank you very much.
Bill Matthews.
Bill Matthews, 1265 Thompson Drive. Most of the thoughts that I have already been expressed. I just wanted to reiterate that I am not in favor of this signage change, and for the reasons that most others have stated here. And I would hope that the planning and zoning folks give that serious consideration. Thanks.
Thank you. Corey Trump. Make sure you have the timer up for this guy.
I won't be long tonight, I promise, I promise. Most of what I was talking about was handled in the code review committee last time, but, real quickly, as quickly as I can, I'll go through a few things that I did notice in the ordinance. I'm not gonna get into my opinions or any of that tonight. And, we look at page 3 and page 4 of the ordinance. This is the examples of wall and window signs. It's basically showing how we are going to measure these signs. All looks good except page 3 contradicts page 4, where it shows channel letters. On the page 3, we show the entire height and entire width, where if we go to page 4, a 2-line set of channel letters is an imaginary box around each line. Preference is each box because it allows you to measure different logos, different shapes, but that was one thing I noticed, something that's contradictory in the ordinance. Really needs to be cleaned up so there's no problems later. Page 5 is the example of monument sign measurements. The change that's not really noticeable in here is now we are going to measure monument signs by the entire width and height of the entire structure. Formerly, it wasn't that way. Formerly, it was the sign area that was measured. City does require that the signs are framed basically all the way around with rock, masonry, brick, whatever it may be. That's what the city wants. That shouldn't come from what the business is allowed to advertise in square footage. My main real concern with it is doing that and changing it to where this is the way we measure it is going to make several signs around town existing become non-conforming. Non-conforming. They will not fit legally in this ordinance. They'll be legal but non-conforming, which means if they change businesses, somebody else buys the place and opens a different store there, their entire sign's illegal. They can't do it. I have a list of the ones I know for a fact that are going to do that, but I'm not going to name those names. That's not right to those business owners. Some of them are my customers. Some of them are not my customers. It's not my place to name drop them. Maybe something in the ordinance to say 25% over that can be the framing, the structure, the masonry work, whatever it may be. But to involve the entire footer, masonry work, signage, everything, you're taking a lot from them. Page 7. I spoke to Drew about this, and he really couldn't comment too much. We talk about the downtown arts and cultural district, which I agree. I think it's a great idea to give them a separate, keep that historic area downtown. The only thing I would ask is for ease of use, could we put a drawing of that map in the ordinance where it's quick and easy to understand? It's easier for you guys pulling permits or to know exactly what those boundaries are. Real quick, I'm almost done. Page 24 should be regulation of awning signs. Not much of a change. Not much really catches my eye too much. The only thing that kind of caught me was that the awnings cannot be internally lit. Again, same concept. We already have awnings in Kerrville that are internally lit. And the way I see it is if their awning goes against the 12% they're allowed for their building signage, most businesses, you're either going to have an awning sign or a building sign. You can't. An awning sign is normally done because there is nowhere to put a wall sign on the building. If the wall sign can be lit and it's taken from your 12% allowance, why wouldn't the awning be allowed to be internally lit? Finally, page 29 of 35. Go almost to the bottom, electronic display signs. Section D says the sign must be framed or bordered by at least 6 inches of masonry, metal, wood, or other material. There's argument on these signs need to ventilate. You cannot close them completely in. That's one concern. My next concern is, what do we mean by framed? What are we talking about by framing? That needs to be clarified, because we'll take Tybee Stadium sign, for instance. There's no rock frame all the way around it. It's hanging between the two poles. Is that sign going to be non-conforming? The Ag Barn, there's no frame around the LED portion of it. Is that going to be non-conforming? Those are the questions I have with clarifying what framed means. Now, I don't know if that means that it has to be just encased. What does that mean? Finally, the last thing on page 29 of 35, section G says must be equipped with a properly, now we're talking about electronic message center signs, must be equipped with a properly functioning default mechanism that will cause the sign to revert immediately to a single fixed, non-transitionary image or solid black screen if the sign malfunctions. I get what we're trying to do there. However, it's not possible. There are some things that can cause a sign to shut down. Now, if the way these signs work are almost like Christmas lights, you put one bulb, the rest of them behind it go out. If one panel malfunctions and flickers, there's no way that the control unit reads that and shuts the sign down. There's just, the technology is not in the sign to do that. Now, the next sentence, having an owner's name on file, where if there's a problem, they can be called at any time of the night and given a time limit to go shut that sign down or put it on a static image. That I agree with. That will work. The first sentence of G, it just does not work. It's not possible. Other than that, that's all the comments I had. I think Code Review Committee did a great job. It's time, it's effort, and I appreciate all of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Corey. Carolyn Lipscomb.
Carolyn Lipscomb, 909 Lake Drive. Well, first of all, I would like to just state that I endorse everything that has been said by the prior speakers regarding the expansion of the electronic signs. I don't see why we need to do that. And secondly, I didn't quite understand in reading through the ordinance on what I think they're called freestanding signs. I would call it a billboard type sign in what I was reading. And as the lots got wider, the sign could get larger. But as that sign gets larger, does it also have to step back from the road further? Does the setback for the sign increase as the sign gets larger? Or just because you have a 400-foot lot, you can have a huge billboard on the road?
True.
We do not have a required setback for the signs.
That's what I thought. Okay.
So
this cannot be in the right way.
Right.
Or encroach on it.
Cannot be in the right of way, and the few that I mentioned, the smaller, more or less incidental signs have some setback requirements, but the freestanding and monument signs just have to be on the property.
Okay, so somebody could have a 100-square foot sign on their property right up by the road, and is that not what we had back about 20 years ago when we first came to Kerrville, when we actually had billboards around town?
The current code does not require setbacks either.
And we didn't have them then either, and so you would look out a restaurant window and you'd be looking right into a sign and not see any further or any more view than that sign. So I had some concerns about that.
Drew, I think the size, you're thinking of the old billboards. They're not allowed that size at all?
That's correct. For an off-premise sign, the maximum is 100 square feet. So the traditional billboard that you would see on the side of the highway is not allowed. But the current code and the proposed code do not have increasing setbacks based on size like you're asking.
Okay, well, I was just throwing that out for consideration. I can understand that when you have something that sits way back and you want a big sign, but should that not sit back as well? Thank you.
Thank you. Calsto Griffith. Did I pronounce that right?
That's a strange name. Hi, I'm Callisto Griffith, and I'm speaking on behalf of Turtle Creek Olives and Vines at 211 Earl Garrett Street. We are against the proposed sign ordinance because we would like to keep the uniqueness of the hill country quality and historical integrity. I'm actually a Gillespie County native. My family founded Mason in Harper, Texas, and my mother was born in Keitel Hospital in Fredericksburg. My parents still live in Stonewall. I have lived in Austin and San Antonio and New York, and I love being back home, because I don't have that big city. I don't have the signs. I don't have the hustle and bustle. I don't have the traffic. While I know that we are all here because we want to increase the footprint, of the city of Kerrville, we want to drive traffic here, with these bigger cities. And actually, people come here to get away. I mean, people come from all over, but mostly Houston, San Antonio, Dallas, just to get away from the big city. So I feel we should proceed with caution with these electronic signs. I love the ability to see the stars. I love the ability to bring out my telescope or binoculars, and just clearly and vividly see how beautiful the night sky is. I think that is something that the hill country really embraces and really embodies, is not the big city. We are the hill country. And if we decide to go down that route of having electronic signs, where does it stop? Houston doesn't have any zoning laws. They're just, anything goes. So while I know that the city of Kerrville wants to be different than Fredericksburg, and we are completely different, there are other ways that we can go about bringing publicity and footprint to Kerrville. We can throw a fence. All of the businesses can join together and have banners, and we can do a marketing and PR approach, and we could reach out to the bigger publications. People want to get away. We don't need electronic signs to bring that to us.
Thank you. Vicky Love, any love? Vicky? Thank you.
My name is Vicki Love, and we own 820 Water Street, downtown Kerrville, called Sunrise Antique Mall. And I would like to join with the lady that just spoke to tell you that we've been there for over 20 years, and the business has been there in the building for over 30. And if you only knew 6 days a week how many times my husband Robert, my mother, and I here, we love Kerrville. We're here for our every 3-month trip or our every 6-month trip. They love coming into Kerrville because it's like none other. And I believe your love for Kerrville and the downtown, it just makes us proud to be downtown, and it makes us know you're in our corner. But if we do too much with modernization of the electronic signs, it's not going to be the compliments that we hear. I'm afraid that it could hurt some of us that are drawn to the downtown. And I know there's like some positives and negatives, but we've been there for over 20 years, and we've been through a lot of bad times and good times. And for the HDBDA, that is the downtown organization. We are more together than ever. We love each other. We're working together as a team. And Dr. Rector and his wife, Miss Linda, they have been through the storms and weathered it well. And I respect them so much, but I also know that I don't want nothing to change to hinder us when we're at a peak. And I just hope that everything can be considered to not change our town, to be lit up like something different that will make people not want to repeat coming. Not only do they come from Fredericksburg to visit us in Austin and Dallas and Houston, we have people every week from states everywhere. I have their checks to prove it, and also even other countries, and they love Kerrville, Texas. So consider that in your choices.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank you all for your comments. I want to thank you for being here to represent them. Trust me, we don't feel a lot different than what we've heard. There is no public hearing, and I assume nobody else needs to make a statement. If you do, you need to fill out a card. You need to fill out a speaker card if you would.
Yeah, I signed up. I guess you didn't get that.
Oh, I didn't get it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'm Julie Leonard, and I am chairperson of the Kerr County Historical Commission. And I've got lots of support here. Hold your hands up, people. Our mission statement, we are charged with the protection and the preserving of Kerr County history. I don't see that electronic signs have any place in Kerrville or Kerr County. By the way, I live in Center Point, so you'll forgive me for speaking about Kerrville. So anyway, I think I speak for the majority of our members that we've worked really hard to preserve our history here, and we have lots of projects and some downtown signs that we've been working on. I urge you to please consider not having electronic signs in Kerrville. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments from the commission?
I'll just say I've been struggling with this quite a bit. I like to consider myself a pro-business. I moved to Kerrville 20 years ago without any intention of starting my own business, and lo and behold, I did, and thankful every day for that opportunity. However, I agree with some of Mr. Wampler's statements about electronic signs, and it'd be fine with me if we didn't have any at all. However, I think it's hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube on that. I also like to think of myself as a reasonable person and look at compromise. I started trying to see if there were any opportunities for an expansion of the maximum size, if there was a way that seemed justifiable. And the more I went through it in my mind and the more I listened to comments tonight, I don't think this is a case where I could do that. It would be my recommendation to put the maximum size of electronic display at 32 square feet, no matter what the overall sign size ends up being. And as far there were just some other comments regarding what Bruce had said on some clarification between an awning sign and a protruding sign. I think there is some language there that probably needs to be addressed. I walked Water Street and Earl Garrett this morning measuring signs, see what was at 7 feet, what wasn't. And there's a little bit of confusion. Most of those signs are hanging from an awning without signage on the awning themselves. And those are two different considerations. If you were to put a signage on top of that, then is that a rooftop sign, or is that, so there's a little bit of clarification I think needs to be addressed. Also, Corey's comments on being able to automatically shut a sign down if it starts to malfunction. I can see that, you know, technology doesn't allow for that, so that probably needs to be changed. But I think somebody responsible for that sign does need to come out and address the issue if we got something that's really distracting going on with that sign. And so I guess just overall, I agree with just about all the comments here. One other point, we put it at 7 feet on the maximum or the minimum height, and ADA requirements put that at 6'8" as far as protruding objects go. Just to be consistent with what national codes and what architects and builders are used to working with, that may be a dimension that could be looked at. Of the signs that I measured downtown today, just about everything met that 7-foot dimension. Some of those signs didn't, but almost all of them did meet 6'8". One question I had for you, Drew, that you might be able to clarify for me, on the light posts downtown that have banners on them, when I measured those, almost all of those were less than 7 feet, but almost all of those would meet a 6'8" dimension. But I wasn't sure if that type of sign fell in that awning category.
Right. The signs on the light poles do not fall under the sign code because they're in the public right-of-way. The ones I measured are about 6'10", 6'11". The pole banners that are referenced in the sign code are on private property, more like what you'd see in a parking lot, car dealerships, Peterson Hospital, and that sort of thing. So those are outside of the sign code and not considered awning signs.
Okay. Okay. Well, so I guess, so I would just say that if we could clarify some of these minor issues, but then set the maximum electronic display at 32 feet throughout, that would be my preference.
Yep.
I have much the same feeling as fellow next to me. The issue on the monument signs does seem to need to be corrected, I think. That was, forget who brought that up. I think it was Corey, about the whole sign, or is it part of the sign? Not changing that. Leave that, clarify that where it is clear to everybody. I have to concur on the 32 foot. I was on the code review committee. I'm only one on the commission that was. And there was much discussion, much dissension in some cases. But I think that the matter has been resolved to this point. I actually felt like what came out of code review was not a complete package because we were cut short on our deliberations by the 2-hour limit. But as it came out here in the discussion here, I took tally. We had 14 against and 2 for. And by all the applause and so forth, I would imagine the greatest majority of the people here are against the issue. So I think we need to go that away.
David?
All of us served on the 2050 panel, and we worked hard on that, and I was downtown preservation, and so we've got the center core protected, as someone pointed out. You have to understand that, the zoning code in the city of Kerrville was quaint. That's a compliment. And so now, once and for all, we have a real zoning code that's come together. We've gone from 47 down to 17 categories and whatever else. Just like making any omelet, you get a big mix-up and whatever else, but you also have to deal with the specific problems that come up on each one of these situations. Bruce has come before us and talked about the zoning where we said, okay, this is all going to be zoned this way. Oh, wait a minute, Aunt Frida lives here, and what, well, council, you guys can take that on, or we'll get it as it comes to us on changing things out. We need to have some things that are grandfathered and whatever else. Corey, who has to pull the load, knowing about the industry, we've got a panel that sits here and makes decisions and whatever else, but he's rubber to the road. He also has to make a living and go out and put up signs every day so he can feed his family. But the specifics, some of the things that you talked about, Drew, you need to see about those and whatever else. And I don't know if you've ever trapped any animals. You put up a camera, and when they come in, it comes up on your iPad, and you push a button and you trap the animals. So if the sign goes out, it comes up on your iPad and you turn the thing off. I don't know. But you can work those sort of things out, and you can do those things that need to be done. We can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. All we can do is we can push this thing forward and hang it on the council and say these are the specific things that need to be spoken to and treated. Okay? So I concur, 32 feet's good enough, and I would join in a motion to do what we can, and like I say, pass this on as it is, to be considered for these several specific things that have come up this evening.
Let me make some comments, if I might. I would make, Ed, was that a motion? Didn't sound like it. But...
No, I'll give it to the wordsmith.
Okay, my comments.
The architect.
The only thing I would add, I too concur that the maximum electronic sign size should be 32 square feet, irrespective of the allowable advertising space. Whether that be 100 up to 400 or above 400. To be more specific, I would anywhere in this draft code that says anything other than 32 feet, to take it down to 32 feet. But I concur with everything that's been said. We talked about e-signs not to exceed 32 square feet. We talked about defining more the awning versus the protruding sign. We talked about a requirement of auto shutdown on page 29. Basically that based on somebody that's in that business says we can't do that. It'd be nice if we could, but I think some kind of notification should be required. I think we need to define more the frame and border of a sign on page 29. And the last thing, I think we need to clarify a monument sign related to total size of the sign versus total size of the unit versus the size of the advertising space.
I'll second that motion. Mr. Chairman.
Now, I have a motion. I don't like to make motions. Would you like to clarify anything here?
Let's see. We'll give it a shot here. Give me just a second, please.
That needs to be in all instances.
Now, we have, I guess, an option to have staff make these changes and bring it back to planning and zoning, or we could have staff we could approve with these changes and then it go to council.
That's correct.
And
in my preference.
Okay. I'd rather.
Commissioner, Commissioner, if you have pretty clear direction on what to amend, staff is certainly willing to make those changes as directed to carry on to council with your recommendation. If there's something that we need to present several options or different language and then debate those various pieces is what I would recommend coming back to the commission. But if you have pretty clear direction, we can draft that.
Well, and I guess the things that I'm still not sure about is whenever we say clarify the size of a monument sign.
Or how it's calculated.
Right.
Right.
The current process we use to measure it is the sign itself, not including the monument. The graphics presented from our consultant did include the monument. So
did
to
those
stay
dimensions
consistent,
change?
the dimension, the total square footage stayed the same, but now we are including the actual structure where we did not include the structure before.
Okay.
So, simple way to stay consistent with the current code, we can go back to measuring the sign and not the monument, if that's the direction. And I think that was Mr. Traub's point, is those signs that are built 32 square feet today, we did not count the brick surround that makes the monument.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with the way it's drafted now, we would include that, which means the whole sign needs to be reduced, monument included.
Right.
So I think for consistency, we can go back to measuring just the sign and not the monument itself.
The commissioner shall agree with that. And then, let me just make a note real quick.
There was also, Drew, we need to add this to the list,
Channel letters.
Channel letters, exactly.
The graphics that you have before you on page 3 and 4 that Mr. Traub referenced, we currently measure them per line.
Okay.
Which is the graphic on page 4.
Okay.
That one piece of graphic on page 3 that shows it as a collective measurement, we can take that out.
Change that.
Yeah, the rest of those graphics are still adequate, but that one did conflict.
And last item, I believe, is awning sign versus protruding sign. And I'm not sure how to address that. If you have an awning that has a sign hanging from it and you have a recessed can, is that internally lit at that point? Not necessarily. And that may just be getting a little too far into the weeds, and I'm not sure if that's something that we can clarify at this point or not. I would like to, if we could. If we could have language in there that an awning sign has letters or graphics on the awning itself, whereas a protruding sign hangs from a structural awning.
So I'll go through the definitions here. I probably don't have a picture to clarify all of them. On page 10, the definition for an awning sign is a sign painted on or attached to the outside of an awning. I don't know how well you can see that on your screen. The big red awning here, under the cookie factory there,
Right.
would be that type of sign. So
Right.
the lettering is applied to the awning. We would then measure the box around the lettering, not the awning itself, and of course the logo up above it. So that would be an awning sign.
Okay. That makes sense.
Just so we're staying with it, on page 12, a canopy sign. Again, canopy being your larger vehicular structures. Adhered to or suspended from the underside of a canopy, which projects into the space. Painted or attached on the outside of the, oh, we've mixed it up there. Should say canopy structure, not awning. I'll make note of that too. Again, those are more your vehicular gasoline stations, the front entry of a hotel, etc.
So under canopy sign, it does list suspended from the underside of a canopy structure.
Correct. Then page 16, projecting sign is a sign other than an awning or canopy sign whose outside edge extends a distance from the face of a wall and is attached either directly to the structure or supported by a frame, pole, or similar device which extends beyond the wall, attached in a similar manner.
That's why we approved the restaurant. It never got put up.
So I think what we could look at, if I understand the commission right, either amend the awning definition to read similar to the canopy, where you do have a panel that hangs below the awning, perpendicular to the building, or I guess perpendicular or parallel to the building. They would be attached to that canopy, similar to what we have on Water Street, Earl Garrett. Front of this building has one, the lettering City of Kerrville on the top of that entry awning to be part of the awning sign. Which
I don't think that that's really what we're trying to do.
Okay.
I think we're just trying to define those hanging signs under a structural awning and know where they apply, what rules they should apply to. I think projecting sign gets close, and maybe all we need to say is a distance from the face of a wall or ceiling.
Okay. I think that'd be the most consistent way to put it, because that is coming off the wall, attached to something, and maybe it's attached to the awning rather than attached to the building.
Right.
And both the projecting sign and the awning sign count towards the allowable percentage for a structure on the wall signs.
Yes.
So I mean, we'd still be counting them the same. We're just making sure the definition is clear.
And we need to define a frame or border. I think the intent was just so that an electronic display sign wasn't the only thing that you saw. But I can understand the need for ventilation. Maybe we just say that some portion of the sign material must extend 6 inches beyond the limits of the electronic display, whether it's brick or stucco or wood or whatever the sign material is.
Right. Just
so that you don't have that raw edge. And I agree, that the sign at the stadium is not that way.
Right.
But if we're trying to decide what we want to see in the future, I think that's a reasonable design element.
So, based on your language there, I'm going to use a couple examples that we have here. The gas station sign here, if we assumed blue and green is digital, the pole itself would be that kind of frame piece that you're describing, whether it be a metal pole or a brick column.
Correct.
The sign right above it, obviously a monument sign, we're not exactly looking apples to apples, but it does have that brick frame on both sides. And then this panel above it would be a separate piece of that sign. Tivy Stadium, I think we're all familiar with, has the brick columns on both sides of the sign. The digital panel itself has nothing above and below it until you get to the Antler Stadium lettering well above it on that sign. Or do we all agree that
Like
is
this
framed?
This monument sign that you're showing, that visit us, that whatever.
Right.
If that were open, elevated on the bottom, that could be the ventilation. It wouldn't have to be completely surrounded.
Right. And I'll use this small graphic on the side. You have that gap underneath the sign. You have a gap above it, and you have two columns supporting it. Whatever that column material is would really match the building or the architecture of the building. Do we agree that we're headed in the same direction?
I believe so. And I don't know that it needs to be a whole lot different than what we've described, other than that 6 inches of material. There could be 2 inches of airspace for ventilation, or whatever that airspace needs to be. And so I guess the verbiage is some portion of that material needs to extend 6 inches beyond the electronic display. We are not saying that entire 6 inches has to be solid material.
Okay.
And
But it has to extend around.
but we
the
have to
entire
have,
perimeter.
we have, I don't think we,
Adequate for ventilation.
yeah, I don't think we want to see just a raw edge of a digital sign if we're
Right.
trying to incorporate it into
And I
something
think,
more attractive.
Corey, I think, would agree for the pole sign, where you do have one metal pole as your support, trying to surround the digital display with some brick material, obviously you cannot do that.
Right.
So it's gonna have to be a combination of materials.
Well, these are all enclosed on that Hexon sign. They're completely
Right,
surrounded.
there is a
Yeah.
frame to it.
Right.
And the sign does say, or the code does say, metal, other wood, other material consistent with the building, so.
You know, maybe the question is 6 inches too much?
Right. We'll work with our consultant and get a better defined language on
Well,
that
and,
based
you
on the
know,
conversation.
it just could, it could even go to the sense of vented frame.
Right.
And that may be sufficient enough. I think what we're trying to do is get some other material around the edges of that electronic display, so that's, it just, you know, it fits in with the rest of the sign a little bit more. Okay, we're gonna give a shot at a motion here.
This is all recorded.
I move that we approve the draft sign ordinance with the following amendments. First of all, that 32 square feet be the maximum dimension for any electronic display for any size sign. That we add the words wall or ceiling on a protruding sign. That we delete the requirement for an auto shutdown on a malfunctioning sign, but keep the requirement that the person responsible for that sign be contacted to shut it off if it is malfunctioning. Add the verbiage to frame or border that would include vented frame or some verbiage that gives us some type of material around an electronic display that frames that display. I think we should also use our current calculations for determining the size of a monument sign. And we should calculate channel letter signage per line, not overall. I believe I got it.
Distance from sidewalk to 6.8.
Mr. Director's asking about changing the 7-foot clearance to 6'8" or leave it at 7.
Commissioners, do y'all have
What's the code say? Building code.
ADA puts the minimum at 6'8". That just may be a little more consistent with what builders and architects are used to specifying.
Okay.
So let's add the minimum height of a protruding sign to be 6'8" above the walking surface.
I'll carry that through each section for pedestrian clearance.
That's my motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. Passes 4-0. Staff report.
This will go to City Council on September 10th for the first reading, September 24th for the second reading. To some of the comments that we heard from the public, dark sky ordinance is pending discussion with the Code Review Committee. They're working on some different surveying and going to have a draft proposed to them on August 29th. That'll come through the Planning Commission later on this year. Landscape and tree ordinance will also be coming back through this commission from Code Review Committee later this year.
Will that be on the 29th also?
Yes. And then subdivision regulations are also going to be reviewed by the Code Review Committee, passed through this board to City Council.
Does everything come through P&C?
Not quite. So with that, that's all we have.
Okay. We're adjourned.